Okay. Welcome back to HSC AMA. I'm Julia Nimchinsky, co-founder of this platform, and joined by our head of community, Rebecca Tisitano, the Low Hype Cycle, and Justin Michael, co-founder. How are you doing?
Life is good. Where's the man of the hour?
The man of the hour, Akio Aido, our enterprise executive, account executive from Grammarly, is joining us in a second.
Sorry about that. I thought I was in the right meeting room, but maybe I wasn't. But it's great to see everyone.
Good to see you, man. We're really glad to hear. What does your cup say?
This is a cup from Seattle, Powell's Books. I used to live in Seattle, but yeah.
It's amazing. Akio, it's gonna be tough.
It's gonna be tough.
It
All
is.
right. I'm excited.
What's unique about this one, and I know that you know, but to all of you joining and watching, is that all the questions are completely compiled by the community, submitted by the community, voted by the community. So, Rebecca, let's roll. Question number one.
All right, let's roll. I also want to preface that who doesn't know about Hard Skill Exchange at this point, but we're promoting Hard Skill Exchange. And if you get your question answered today, great. And if you don't get your question answered today, you can always look up Akio on Hard Skill Exchange. He's available as one of our coaches that have been hand selected by these two wonderful individuals. So we're going to go really fast, Akio, today because we have a lot of questions to get through. Julia, can you start us off with the first question?
Happy to. So first question, Akio, is what do you bring into your team to help drive and close the opportunity?
It's a great question, and it's a combination of things. It really depends on where the deal is in the sales cycle. But one of the most important things, especially nowadays, is bringing your executives into the conversation. And for many of you, you might find that some of your executives are really good at client-facing opportunities, and others are more operators, which means that you actually have to coach your executives on what you need them to bring to the table, how you want them to bring it to the table, and when to bring it to the table. So that's number one. And executives are, the reason why I say executives to bring to the table is because they can multi-level into places where you can't. Right? I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times where I've sent multiple messages to different CIOs, CTOs, CFOs, only to get ignored. And meanwhile, my CRO sends an email that's a page long that I would say, no one would ever respond to this, and they get a response. So titles do matter, especially environments like this, and they can multi-thread you into different areas of the business.
What kind of help can an account executive typically expect from the marketing team to successfully close enterprise sales in terms of making the sales process faster and smoother? Alignment
is the most important thing that they can bring to the table. So it has to be product and marketing, in my opinion, come first, and sales closes demand. So product marketing creates demand, sales closes demand. And it's really important that we are all aligned in terms of who we're targeting. I've been a 4 times founding sales team member of 4 different startups. And in the beginning, a lot of the marketing is very user-centric. And as a salesperson coming into the mix, we really have to make this more buying-centric. If we want to close bigger deals, we need to make sure that we're marketing to the appropriate contacts. And so as a result, if we are able to align with our marketing teams in terms of what our actual strategy is and how we're pursuing this, that's the type of help that I expect from my marketing team to help me with.
Got to be an interrogation for yes, but Rebecca.
It's all good.
This kind of piggybacks on that, but it says, this question says, since Grammarly is simple on paper, how much depth do you need to explain to the businesses that you sell to? And it expounds upon that. The only thing that I know about Grammarly is paying a subscription to use their AI grammar correction. So how much depth do you need to find to explain to those businesses that you sell to?
Absolutely. I think working at Grammarly is one of an area where I've grown the most. And the reason being is, to your point, many people just think of us as a grammar, punctuation, spelling solution, right? Or a small AI solution, if you will. And in this economy, you have to think, do buyers just buy on grammar, punctuation, spelling on that alone? And, most people would say, I think most people agree, is absolutely not. There's no way. That's probably the first thing that gets cut, right? And so what do we have to do in order to elevate the story to tie this to more strategic initiatives that a financial person would sign off on? When you're working with companies trying to cut their SaaS spend by 30% or what have you, or even more, how do you start to elevate your story? So it actually requires a lot of depth. And this is the primary reason why I started going to strategy consulting practices, to understand how to construct arguments to attach yourself to larger things than yourself, right? Than what you're actually going through. And how do you actually structure their thoughts, the customer's thoughts, and your thoughts, and create a business case around that? So it is quite extensive. How do you take the simple act of writing and communication and apply it to something greater initiative like brand consistency, legal consistency, compliance consistency, right? So those are the types of arguments that I have to make, and I have to get my prospects to agree with me to use Grammarly for that, and not get us cut from any budgets, to actually add us in this new category of budget as well, which is communication. So it's a two-folded answer, but quite a lot of depth to get there.
I want to piggyback on that with my own question. Could you take what you've done for Grammarly and kind of break it down, how you think about that for a different company? So we're not selling Grammarly. How would you think about finding that depth with a different product or different service?
So if you're working in the enterprise, and I focus mostly on the enterprise, I do sell some mid-market accounts, bigger mid-market accounts and things like that. But when we look into the enterprise and taking it from this user-centric, which, based on that question, is very user-centric question around, well, this helps with grammar, this helps me as an individual, but how do I actually start to elevate to a strategic initiative? A lot of it comes with a lot of research. A lot of research into these accounts. Before you can even start to think about selling, we need to understand the greater initiatives of the broader market. And, picking a niche, going into their 10Ks and seeing what they're talking about is one way of going about it, right? They list all their opportunities, all their risks, and what have you. But 10Ks can vary in multiple depths of information. Some are just, you can't do much with it. Others, you can tell a little bit more from it. I try to make correlations between how they've done as a company in certain categories over a few years. So I'll look at multiple 10Ks to look at like attrition, for example. That's one of the focuses I look at. But if I was in another company, I might focus on other things as well. In addition to that, there's a lot of other ways of breaking down externally how we fit into initiatives. There's something called that strategy consultants use called a pestle analysis, which looks at political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. And these are the external pressures that's pushing executives to put certain strategic there's a lot of other ways of breaking down externally how we fit into initiatives. There's something called that strategy consultants use called a pestle analysis, which just looks at political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. And these are the external pressures that's pushing executives to put certain strategic there's a lot of other ways of breaking down externally how we fit into initiatives. There's something called that strategy consultants use called a pestle analysis, which just looks at political, feedback.
Social, technological, and legal.
What's going on?
I feel like I'm in a loop.
That's the Matrix. The black cat crossed the path again. I've never seen that on a Zoom in 1,000 Zooms.
Akio, do you have Hard Skill Exchange open?
Maybe. Oh, you know what? Maybe I do have.
Yeah,
So
we're streaming on the website, and that's what creates it. I was
maybe
just,
I'm doing it.
is my internet slow?
Yes.
Still
Like, what's wrong with-
under
Feel like
attack?
It was such a good question that it,
Yeah.
such a good answer that
So there we go. Okay, that was it. I had it open in another browser. I didn't realize. So apologies about
It's all
that.
good. Yeah.
It was a good question. But yeah, I mean, it's a simple methods of going about that, looking externally and using general frameworks. And then there's also analyzing when people give you information, a lot of times it's unstructured. And it's how do you make sense of the things that they tell you? So it's always a combination between an external analysis and an internal analysis. And you can break down internal analysis using other variety of frameworks to do that. External is your, as I like to call it, manufacturing a trigger, which is creating a buying situation and attaching yourself to a buying situation. The internal analysis is when you actually have those conversations to see if your hypotheses are right. I make a lot more hypotheses these days. And sometimes I get it right and sometimes I get it wrong. So.
What's the top management principle you adapt to enterprise sales?
So there's multiple. I really focus on building the business case. I think the business case is fundamentally the most important aspect when you're trying to transition people from early adopters and innovators to the early majority. When you look at the definition of an innovator or an early adopter, a lot of times you don't even need a business case, which is why you come into early stage startups, so they don't need a business case to actually close a deal, right? But when you start to deal with more mature buyers, when you're looking at the enterprise, I actually relate the technology adoption curve to a potential buying committee and where their thoughts are on something like this. And if you're going through a whole buying committee, there's different things that people want. So one of the things that I use, as I mentioned, is the pestle analysis. I do use things like the pyramid principle. This was something created by McKinsey decades ago in terms of understanding understanding and organizing thoughts based on what the client is telling you and what have you. How do you break down your call? How do you take what you're learning and create a argument about how to actually proceed this, go forward with this? I do stakeholder analysis. I do also risk analysis as well. I do things like best alternative. And I have an ROI calculator that I utilize as well, whether we start from the very bottom, which is napkin math, right, to all the very top, which is they're giving you stats. 99% of the customers that I work with, they don't have the stats. And so what do you do in between? So I've created a model of the different types of ROI. If I don't have best, what's the best alternative for that? What's the best alternative for that, et cetera. So those are the general principles that I've taken from strategy consulting to apply to my to my sales.
could you rapid fire walk us through your business enterprise close from start to finish?
Yeah, it really depends on how that lead comes to me. If it's inbound, I take a more direct approach, a lot of questions and things like that. When it comes to outbound, I do a lot of different things. So the first is understanding what problem you're trying to solve. I believe top of funnel is all about trying to find out what problem we attach ourselves to so that we can go through any question, anything, explore everything. Once we determine what that problem is, I believe that the middle of the funnel is all about building the business case to support that problem statement. And that means a multitude of things. That means, does the person that you're working with agree with the problem? Does the people around that person also agree with that problem? And the second part of it is that, do those people also agree on the solution of how we're going to go about this? So from there, it's always a lot of checks and balances. Am I validating this? Can I validate this? Do I have good coaches that can talk me through this? I believe in champions, but I also don't believe in champions as well. I believe in talking with as many people within a deal. There is limits to that. If you have too many people, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, things like that. But there's the specific balance. From there, once we're able to agree with the approach, I actually share the business case with them with their names on it to see if there's any additional things that they need to make changes on and what have you. My exit of the mid funnel is an accepted business case or a rejected business case. And then my bottom of the funnel, if it is accepted, is legal, procurement, compliance, IT, all my favorite friends that I go through. But I do attach the business case to that because, as you know, sometimes when you get sent into legal, it gets sent to another country. You have another team that's never seen this before. They don't understand the use case of this. And then they might redline things that they should have never redlined in the first place just because they don't understand the use case. So the business case is keeping everyone aligned. And that's why I believe in so much. That's why I believe in it so much.
Next question. Who do you model your enterprise selling success after?
Great question. I follow a lot of people within industry. I mean, Jamal Raymer is one of my favorite people. Nate from Fluent is one of Nasrallah. When it comes to top of funnel, Justin over here, the person in the bottom right corner, I think some of you may have heard of him. And then I also like looking at like product marketing as well, because it actually helps me with my business cases. A lot of product marketing techniques and what have you kind of also model a little bit of sales as well. So I like what Predictable Innovation is doing on their website. Jose and Warren actually on that team created the technology adoption curve decades ago. So I also like Andy Raskin's in terms of his writing and how he thinks about sales and he goes about it. I like it a lot for thought leadership because he's always working with executives as well. So those are some of my influences that I draw from.
Do you still think that Medic from 1997 is still valid?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's places for frameworks all the time. I go against frameworks a little bit because I believe frameworks like Medic, for example, is a compression of context. It's a very direct answer. When we're talking about a business case, and it's one step away from actually writing a story, right? Because it's if you just follow sales frameworks, all you're doing is creating an outline of a sale. But what moves people to buy things, especially if you don't have every single stat, every single, if you don't understand the market completely, if you're not mature in that market, things like that, the stories are the ones that actually start to move people to a buying decision. So I actually believe that the business case, the story should be the focal point. And then every sales framework should be broken up from there because you'll know exactly what you need. You'll notice that a lot of medics, if you go to different companies, they all vary slightly differently because they require different things, right? So I don't think frameworks like Medic or Spiced or Bant or whatever you're working with should be the first thing that you implement. Focus on the story first and then create a sales process from there.
What are some ways to build a business case?
I explain this in a multitude of ways. It's kind of like when we were in college and we had to write a paper, and what goes into that paper. You need a thesis, right? And in your thesis statement, you're taking this something a playbook out of product marketing is like you're generally fighting against something. What is causing this movement to happen? And so you need to understand that, and it has to be something that everyone can accept, right? Because if people reject your premise of your first statement, then your whole argument falls apart. So what is something generally that people have accepted? You can find that on Google or what have you. From there, you can tell what you're really fighting against, right? This is what we're trying to do. This is the situation. This is what we're trying to do. But with every company, there's certain complications that occur. And with complications, it's like, it could be anything. It could be security. It could be, hey, we're on Google. We can't use anything. We're on Google, or we're on Microsoft, and your product doesn't integrate into Microsoft, then you don't have a deal. So there's certain situations. And then finally, what's the problem that you're trying to solve, right? What are you trying to do? And what are those questions that you're going to ask? What questions are you going to try to solve throughout your whole sales process, right? So there's always a little bit of ambiguity, but it's important to put that up front with them so they can start to feel like they're involved in this research project that you're doing. I'd say that's the very basis of a business case. A lot more comes a lot later when you're trying to justify ROI. And I believe it goes qualitative and quantitative. I don't think, depending on your buyer, it depends on who's going to see this, which is more important. But there's different layers to it. What's your best alternative? If you don't do anything, what's the cost of that? If you do something, what's the cost of that? If there's competitors in that, where's the advantage? Where's the disadvantages? Things like that. So, there's a variety of different ways to kind of build this out, but that should give a basic framework of how to think about things.
What's a common practice in enterprise sales that you disagree with?
There's a lot. I think finding one champion. I think you see a lot of LinkedIn influencers these days, and they're talking about, you need that one champion in order to move a deal forward, or that champion wasn't strong enough, or you didn't ask enough questions. And when you're in enterprise sales, I'm working on a deal right now. I probably talked to maybe 60 people. I mean, one champion is going to influence all of them. And if the argument is like, well, that person doesn't have enough influence, right? That's not really a champion. It's like, it's difficult, especially if you start to go multi-departmental, right? Because if you're working with marketing and they're trying to get support to sell, you're trying to sell to support, you need a champion there as well. So I've never lost a deal where I've had multiple champions, but I've lost deals where I've only had one champion. And I think my biggest advice and some of my painful losses is just focusing on one person and assigning that person almost too soon as my champion, because it can really hurt you at the very end of the process.
So do you always enter at the C level?
Do I always enter? I try to. C level, yeah, I try to. C level is very, very important. When you look into sales, especially when you look at like Jamal's work, Reimer, one of the things that he preaches is, try to enter at the very top, because you get relegated down to run the process. Generally, if I'm talking with someone in the C-suite or SVP level, I do target people at SVP level. Not every C-suite person is going to care about your solution. So it can be challenging in those ways. If I'm talking about grammar, punctuation, spelling as Grammarly, or brand alignment, doesn't always hit the C-suite and what their challenges are. They're generally focused a little bit more outward. And so an SVP might be more receptive to things like that. So I might target at the SVP. It really just depends on the research that I'm doing on the company, what is surfaced.
Okay, we're wrapping up, but last question from me. How do you build consensus with the entire buying committee, even if you have blockers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it all comes down in my case is a business case and presentations, right? And so it's important that you're constructing an argument. You're constructing like a scientific way about going about things, and a lot of other vendors don't do that. And so if you're able to actually start to build and co-build with people, sometimes if you get a lot more influence around the organization, that generally propels your business case forward. I've locked out multiple competitors because I had more of a structured process of building the business case and how we're going to go about it. I do a lot of legal and procurement before my trials even start. And I know that a lot of my competitors aren't doing that. And if you're in an enterprise, sometimes those can take 3, 6, 9 months, right? I just finished one that's 12 months long. To think that other competitors, they're doing that with other competitors and going through all that, I already know that, you know, those competitors are no longer even considered based on my process. So.
Akio,
Can I add one in there? Is that okay?
Oh, go for it.
We had this really cool game on Hype Cycle on CXO Games where it was, is the ROI the story or the math? And is it both? And what's your thinking there?
Yeah, I love that. It's both. It's both. I think, well, it depends on your buyer at the end of the day. It depends on your buyer. But when you're looking at ROI calculating, it's always quantitative and qualitative. And people like to say, well, I have so many VPs tell me qualitative, it doesn't mean anything, but it means so much. It's the context around the numbers, right? And so there's a variety of different things that I look at, especially at Grammarly. You know, no one's measuring communication and the impact of communication. So there are other metrics I do tie myself to, but what is the story? You know, what's the qualitative? Do people like the product? Are they going to utilize it? Right? I made an argument with another company that against another product that they loved the product, but no one was using it. Right. And the qualitative is like, well, people are going to use Grammarly. It's on your computer. We have a 95% adoption rate. Right. So, you know, it just depends on your buyer. CFO might look at numbers more closely than an SVP of a specific division, but I truly believe that it's both. Thank
you, Akio. This was brilliant. We're a little bit over 30 minutes.
Yeah.
What are you drinking?
Spin drip and a coffee.
Amazing.
Pineapple spin drip. Let's go.
If you want to drill business case creation, discovery, deal progression, multi-funnel progression, enterprise selling, and closing, you know where to go. And yeah, that was amazing. We are gonna go live again in a week. It's gonna be Tuesday, and it's gonna be Justin Michael with his new book, Sales Superpowers. So yeah, exciting coaches, exciting times. And then, yeah, Rebecca, closing words.
If you could use someone like Akio to help unstick your deal or give you a little bit of advice, go to hardskill.exchange and click on his handsome face, and you'll be able to book a session with him or multiple sessions with him. He's been in the trenches, as obvious. It's obvious from the answers to the questions that we had today. Thanks so much for your time, Akio, Justin, Julia, and we will see you Tuesday for more JMMing.
Great stuff. Great stuff, Akio. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.